Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Dallas Architecture Forum panel discussion on museums in the making. My name is Nate Udaly, the director of the forum, and we're delighted that you've joined us. Thank you. We're fortunate to have three outstanding individuals join us for this evening's panel discussion. Duncan Fulton will moderate our discussion, joined by Brice Beaird and Hobson Wildenthal as our panelists. We're delighted to have each of these gentlemen with us. The forum is grateful for our panel season sponsors who make presenting this evening's panel possible. We'd like to thank each one of them. They are Galaxy Modern, Purdy McGuire, Turner Construction, and Walter P. Moore. Please join me in thanking our amazing panel season sponsors. Thank you so much. The forum's final panel discussion for this season will be next Tuesday evening, June 29th, looking at the topic of design inspirations. David Hawker will moderate our panel and will be joined by Andrea Alvarez, Bob Borson, Michael Potts. This is sure to be an intriguing and enlightening discussion, so plan to join us next Tuesday, the 29th at 6:30. You can register on Zoom. The panel is free and open to the public. So hope that all of you will join us and also let your friends know about this upcoming panel. AIA CES credit is available for this panel. Following the conclusion of tonight's panel, you can email Jean at dallasarchitectureforum.org with your name and AIA number, and she'll submit your attendance. Now I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for this evening's panel, Duncan Fulton. Duncan is co-founder and the recently retired chairman and CEO of GFF, the 2019 recipient of the TSA's prestigious Architecture Firm Award. Duncan's architectural work is diverse, with an emphasis on cultural and corporate projects. He's worked for many of Dallas's most notable cultural institutions, including the Perot Museum of Nature and Science, the AT&T Performing Arts Center, the Dallas Arboretum, the Dallas Zoo, and the Dallas Theater Center. The Dallas Arts District has been a particular area of influence for Duncan, where he's worked continuously since 2004 on a variety of projects. His corporate work includes Pizza Hut's World Headquarters, Nokia's Americas Headquarters, and Capital One's North Texas campus. Duncan has served his profession and community in many ways. He has been president of both the Dallas AIA and the Dallas Architectural Foundation, and on the boards of the Texas Society of Architects, the Dallas Architecture Forum, and the University of Kansas School of Architecture. Duncan's civic leadership includes being the president of the Dallas Assembly, the vice chairman of Methodist Health Systems Board, the Dallas Arboretum's Executive Committee, the AT&T Performing Arts President's Advisory Board, the Real Estate Council Board, the Salesmanship Club, and the City of Dallas's Urban Design Advisory Committee. A very, very busy man giving much back to the community. Duncan has written and lectured on a range of subjects, including the architectural design, planning policy, the Dallas Arts District, historic preservation, and sustainable design. We appreciate Duncan organizing and moderating this evening's panel. And now, please join me in welcoming Duncan Fulton and his panelists, Brice Beaird and Hobson Wildenthal. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Nate, and thanks to all who are joining us this evening. Brice Beaird, I'm going to introduce first. He's president and owner of the Beaird Agency, Inc. marketing services company. He's also a talented and beloved musician, both in the Dallas area and elsewhere. He was a founding member of Coconuts, who played for years on Greenville Avenue, and you can still catch him at venues such as Poor David's Pub. He's a graduate of Texas Tech. Not surprisingly, he's got a BBA degree and a minor in radio, television, and film, and in 2001 was honored as a distinguished alumnus from Texas Tech. His marketing agency has produced a variety of different things for a number of noted corporate, academic, and civic organizations. Brice is involved civically. He's a give back type of person. Involvement includes the Dallas Zoo, the Dallas Summer Musicals, Momentous Institute, and SMU. He's also given back on the academic front. Has served as an adjunct professor at Texas Tech and at the Timberland Advertising Institute at SMU. And he's guest lectured at Texas Tech and at the SMU School of Business. As a songwriter, he's still very active. He continues to perform as well as make regular trips to Nashville, where he's got deep relationships in the publishing industry and is still recording demos and working on that front. He's recorded 2 CDs. He's also written and performed a number of commercials that you might recognize for companies that you would certainly recognize. With all that, in 2016, Brice began working with a group of other Texas music enthusiasts to create something called the Texas Music Experience, which will be what he's here to talk to us tonight. So Brice, welcome. Hobson Wildenthal is another panelist this evening. He holds degrees from Sul Ross State College and a PhD degree in physics from the University of Kansas. He's held a variety of appointments at notable academic institutions, and as some of those have included visiting appointments that have ranged as far afield as Los Alamos National Labs, institutions in Germany, England, France, and Brazil, and he's also a Guggenheim Fellow. For the first 20 years of his career, he devoted much of that to non-administrative work. He was a specialist in experimental and theoretical studies of the structure of atomic nuclei, work recounted in over 200 published papers in that period of time, as well as publications in journals, conference proceedings. He moved into teaching, and then after that, he moved into administrative roles at a variety of institutions. First as the department head of physics at Drexel, and then was quickly promoted to dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of New Mexico. He came to UTD in 1982 as chief academic officer and also the title vice president of academic affairs. He served in a variety of capacities since then, executive vice president and provost until 2018, at which time he assumed the position of distinguished scholar in residence and professor of physics. So needless to say, Hobson has a remarkable background in both science and academia. And as a result of that, and his experience working in many different academic settings, he was asked by UTD to head the Athenaeum, which is a unique cultural initiative that involves museum as well as performance facilities and other cultural aspects that will be the subject of his talk this evening. So Brice and Hobson, thank you so much for joining us. The program tonight is going to include architecture, but it's really going to focus on the formative process. And this really came about as a result of some of my personal experiences working with the projects that ultimately became the Perot Museum, the AT Performing Arts Center, Clybourne Park, and a facility you may or may not be familiar with, Camp John Mark in Meridian, Texas. For both the Perot and the AT&T Performing Arts Center, I was working in an architectural capacity, and those included a variety of different roles, be it program or local architect, sustainability consultant, where my firm had the opportunity to participate in those. On the project that became Clybourne Park, my role was a little different, and I was on the board of Real Estate Council at the time when, in the early 2000s, when they made the first major gift to what became Clybourne Park in the form of $1.5 million that became the seed money allowed that project to proceed and also kind of spearheaded its development. So what I observed, and I thought would be interesting to share with y'all tonight, is that in each case, the buildings and structures that develop from those initiatives, everybody knows all about them. But they're the end result of a formative process that most people know little or nothing about because it happens in the background, and it's really a fascinating story. What I observed was a process that went on for years, in many cases decades, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating because it was full of ups and downs, twists and turns, serendipitous things that really made a difference. And so I would just remind everyone that when you see civic assets like that, they're kind of like an iceberg. You see the building, that's really only a part of the story. The formative process is what's not visible, but it's the foundation that all those things rest on. And I'm going to just give you a brief example of the Perot. In the project that became the Perot in the mid-'80s, there's a group that really got together at the Dallas Museum of Natural History to think about what their future looked like. That ruminated for a while. Good Fulton and Farrell was selected in 1996, about 12 years after that process began, to help them really determine what that would be. What is it? How big? What are the parts? And between 96 and 97, we, along with the exhibit designer, worked on developing concepts. And the end product of that was a program of about 3 renderings. And those renderings nurtured that project for the next 10 years. Between 97 and really 2005, that entire time was spent looking for support, trying to find funders, trying to find a site to look at sites. And it was a very long process. And it really wasn't until 2005 that the site they're on now, the site in Victory, was purchased, the campaign was launched. And then in 2008, almost 20 years after the first thinking began, that was a year of great momentum. Morpheus was selected as the architect. The children made the lead gift of $50 million. Interesting enough, the Perot family was not involved in a foundational way until 2008. And that's really when the expansion facility was named the Perot Museum of Nature and Science. And that all happened looking into the teeth of what ultimately became the Great Recession. And it finally opened in December 1, 2012. So for really almost 30 years, a small group kind of nurtured that flame. The way it ended up in the Perot is at Victory is very serendipitous. The then executive director, Nicole Small, happened to be sitting next to a woman that was about her age on an airplane, began talking with her. They swapped notes about what they were doing. She happened to be an art consultant for Victory. And as they say, one thing led to another. And that was the door that really opened for the Perot to be at that site and become the Perot Museum. So again and again, you see serendipitous things like that happen that are tremendously important. Most people never hear those stories. Most people never understand the issues, get exposure to the issues involved, and that's what we're really to talk about tonight. So really the purpose of tonight's program is to provide insight into a couple of current initiatives that haven't yet manifested themselves in a building and currently in the formative process. So with that, Brice, I'd like to ask you to start by sharing some of the background on the Texas music experience with us.
I will do that. And thank you, Duncan. Thanks for having us and putting this together, and Nate for your work and involvement with tonight's program. It is an honor and a pleasure to present the Texas music experience to you all. And thank you for everyone who's online tonight too. I'm gonna switch over here to my sharing and see if we come up here. And we should have it working. Hopefully you see the Texas Music Experience. It's reassuring to hear the story about the Perot, because I mean the Perot was inspiring and really started giving us ideas about how we would like to form this thing we call the Texas Music Experience. And it's also very encouraging to hear the number of years that we're involved, because I have learned one thing. Our group has been together for about 6 years in the formation of this program. And I have learned that timing is everything. I sometimes think if we've gotten this thing off the ground 2 years ago and all of a sudden got hit with COVID, who knows what would have happened. But it all lies in fate. It does lie somewhat in serendipity. And I'm still looking for that person on the plane I can have that conversation with. But the Texas Music Experience, this will give you an idea. One of the things that we have learned through the process of knowing what is already out there in Texas, there really isn't a Texas music museum. There are variations of it, and there are certain museums that address a particular genre, such as country western or gospel music, for instance. But there's not one thing that does it exactly the way we're looking at it. This is what our graphic mood board is, basically. Kind of gives you a sense of what you might expect when you enter the Texas Music Experience. If you look down to the right corner, you'll see there's a very broad range of Texas musicians. A lot of people think when you say Texas music, they think, well, it's Waylon, Willie, and the Boys, but it is definitely that, but it's a whole lot more, and it's very wide ranged and it's very deep. And as you can see, those artists right there represent a whole diverse platform of various Texas musicians. And there's so much, and it's so rich that we saw it as a way to create something that is a little bit more where we see it as a way to honor Texas music, its past, present, and future. We see this place as engaging, as interactive, as inspiring, educational, and fun. And also there could be some immersive elements in it as well. It's been modeled after places I've been to, and some of the advisory group have been to: the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Experience Music Museum in Seattle, which is now Mopop, and then another very interesting place that does an excellent job of instrument exhibit is the Musical Instrument Museum in Arizona. So, Duncan, as you mentioned, the Perot Museum, we like to think of our concept as the Perot Museum of Music. When I first visited the Perot, I was amazed how something like that could teach you and educate you in such a fun and engaging way. And that's really what sparked this whole concept and thought of what we could do with music, and in particular, Texas music. We are 501c3. A very important component of our programming is music education. We want to open the doors to kids in the neighborhood, and in the area that we have been looking. It would be a very important part of their particular life situation if they had a place like this to come. And we would have Texas musicians who would be doing instruction. We'd like to offer curriculums that are not only just instrument instruction, but songwriting and performance. And one very important thing is also music production, which I'll share with you in a second here. We want to tie into community programs in Dallas. Booker T. Washington is an art school in the Dallas Independent School District. Big Thought is a kind of a creative think tank place for kids to go after school. Texas Music Project raises money to provide musical instruments for schools that need some help. Art House Dallas is kind of like a creative incubator for writers and musicians and artists. And all these places we see a collaboration, a tie-in, where we can kind of cross-promote our concepts. So the vision, we have used as a model a building at the Fair Park in Dallas. It's the Women's Museum. Well, it was the Women's Museum. It's now the Women's Building. This building was built back in 1910. At that time, and only in Texas can this happen. By day, it was a cattle auction place, a livestock auction place. And at night, it transformed to a musical theater, or opera house. And so imagine what that was like in the summertime. It was, but I thought it was interesting. This place did house music of that type, even back in those early days. So with Good Fulton and Farrell, we walked into the building and did our photography, and then got back to the drawing board and began to superimpose different ideas, only basically just to give the concept of what we're trying to do. We're not locked into this building. I wish I could say maybe down the road that might happen. Photoshop is wonderful. We went ahead and put our name up on this building. It's a beautiful building. And you can see elements of the architecture. You can see the ceiling, the wooden ceiling, and the flooring and whatnot. That's all real stuff that's there. And then our elements that we added, and just to walk you in and give you a couple of concept ideas. On the left is what we call, it's a digital Texas music artist digital display. And the way this thing works, and I'll try to be brief about this, but when you walk in over here, you would check in and you would tell the person at the desk what Texas music artists you really like. Well, you'd be given a lanyard that would be programmed with that information, and sensors in these areas, in particular areas throughout, would pick up that information. And so, for instance, if you were going through the digital wall, Willie Nelson might be on your list and in your programming, and he would pop up. You would have ear pods or some sort of hearing system to listen in and hear the story and other facts about these artists. Taking you through, you can see it's the way we like the feel of this place is it's open, it's engaging. It has areas where you can actually will have artifacts and exhibits. We don't see the exhibits being just like a guitar in a glass case. We'd rather see that guitar come alive. Maybe it's on a pedestal that rotates, and it also is able to, by some means, you can actually hear it played, or you can hear audio of it being played by the music artist who played it. Willie's guitar would be incredible, but something to that effect would be the way we'd like to see how we handle our exhibits. In the back, this place actually exists. It used to house these big tube televisions and would present multimedia programming. All the tube TVs are gone now. Well, we saw it as an opportunity to come in with flat screen. And in this case, it can be used for a lot of purposes, but in this case, this is a visual of the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. And essentially what's happening, this little person right here is waving his arms, and what he's able to do is to conduct the Dallas Symphony Orchestra in a way where his arms kind of control the movement of the orchestra. I read that this has been done, I think, over in Germany somewhere. So it is a possibility, and it would make it engaging and fun. This building also has a 400-seat auditorium, and in this instance, we're having a little fun with some holographic programming. There are two little kids that are rocking out to ZZ Top, but it does lend itself to certain things like that. It also, of course, we could have songwriting seminars, performances, and it makes for a very intimate setting, theater setting. The second floor is probably the most dynamic. We call this the genre music hall, because once you really start to dive into Texas music, it is amazing how many genres of music that there are out there. And so this place, in a very engaging and interactive way, covers those genres from everything from Texas blues to rock and roll to classical music to conjunto to tejano, and so on. So our hope is that through this experience, really, this is the one where you walk out and you go, I had no idea that Texas music was what this place is. The third floor, as I mentioned about production, we saw an opportunity here to build a state-of-the-art recording studio and sound stage. And for two purposes: one, to obviously broadcast or play live Texas music and be able to broadcast that music or stream it out on a regular basis. We could also use it for production, music production instruction. So young aspiring producers and engineers would have the opportunity, and this would be part of our nonprofit program, to be able to instruct and teach young engineers and producers all about the production of music. So this kind of gives you then a layout of this particular building. It's 70,000 square feet. You can see this is the first floor. We didn't have any renderings to cover the Texas Timeline exhibit over to the left here, but I saw this idea at Stonehenge in Southampton, and this was a whole multimedia presentation. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it showed you in 360 degrees how Stonehenge was built. And it got me thinking how we could also do something similar to that and tell the history of Texas music, starting with, the Native Americans on the plains that take you from there to the Czechoslovakian immigrants meeting the folks coming across the border from Mexico, and how music forms were generated. That's the beauty of Texas music and its history and the things that it can offer. The second floor this shows where the genre hall is. We have listed for the cafe. The theater is actually 2 floors, and the administrative offices. The third floor, as I mentioned, was the recording studio and sound stage. So this is our concept. It's what we use to really try to tell the story. We have, as James Taylor, I have played his songs a lot, and there's one song he wrote called Sweet Baby James, and the words to the song, a line in it goes, with 10 miles behind me and 10,000 more to go. And that's about the position I'm in right now. But it's been a pleasure to present this to you all, and I hope that you'll have an opportunity someday to come visit the Texas Music Experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Brice. Hobson, would you share with us some kind of thoughts about where you are and background on the Athenaeum?
Surely, Duncan. I will say it's a great privilege to be able to meet with you and your colleagues in the forum, an audience that we don't normally get in contact with, and so it's a great privilege. The Athenaeum is a wonderful word. Of course, recalls Athens and the Acropolis. Our wonderfully creative colleague, Rick Bertel, came up with the name. But we have to be flexible in what we mean by the Athenaeum. What we really mean by the Athenaeum is a arts complex. The University of Texas at Dallas Arts District. We've got the great model downtown. So just as I don't have too much familiarity with your architectural forum, I can well imagine that many members of the forum don't have much knowledge about the University of Texas at Dallas and why we would even be thinking about an Athenaeum or an arts district. And when I came to the University of Texas at Dallas in 1992, we didn't think about an art museum. It's kind of the last thing we would have thought about. For a good 20 years, our focus at UT Dallas was to have our size rise up to the level of what we considered our quality. We had really first-rank faculty and good students by legislative diktat, but not enough of faculty and not enough students. And so our goal for decades was to bring more Texans and students from all over the world to Dallas to get a great education in UT Dallas. And by golly, it happened. For a dozen years, we were the most rapidly growing university in the country. And 3 or 4 years ago, we passed all the markers that we'd set for ourselves decades before. We're now nationally certified research university. Until we reached our 51st year, in the 50th year, we were the best university in the world, less than 50 years old. But unfortunately, that was not an accolade we could keep forever because we aged out right after the University of California at Irvine. But as we grew, and now we are enrolling roughly 30,000 students. We have 8,000 students living on our campus land, 1.6 times bigger than my hometown of Alpine, Texas. 6,000 new students come each year to the university. We've got nationally ranked programs in management and engineering and a full academic profile. But that first 20 years, we never thought about an art museum or an Athenaeum. But as we grew into what is now our new major university status, we first realized that we needed a fitting place for our great non-musical students to perform their music, because among our great students, which include 200 National Merit Scholars each year coming in, is an amazing amount of musical talent distributed over these prospective scientists and medical doctors and engineers. They've studied music since they were preschool, and they bring to us talents, first chair in the state orchestra, repeatedly concert performances downtown. But we didn't have a place for them to perform for their fellow students or to basically show their greatness. So we worried about that. But we were mainly focused on building laboratories for our engineering and science people and capacity for our School of Management. Then things started to happen. First thing that happened was that Edith and Peter O'Donnell gave us a gift to create the Edith O'Donnell Institute for Art History, led again by Professor Bertel. And so we had art programs. We educate students in art. We have art professors. We had art historians, but the O'Donnell Institute raised the ante up by a factor of 10. And we're still working on fulfilling all those dreams. But probably the O'Donnell Institute then prompted the first of the precipitating events leading to the Athenaeum. And the first of these events was that Richard Barrett, 3 or so years ago, called up Rick Bertel and told Rick that he had decided he wanted to gift the collection of Swiss art that he and Nona Barrett had assembled over many years, which is literally the only thing approximating it is found in Switzerland and not too many places there. Well, that was an earth-shaking gift, transformative gift. And we said yes. we then undertook the obligation to build a museum for the Swiss art, Beaird Museum. Started trying to raise the funds for that new museum. And that, of course, kind of revived the issue that we'd like to have a performance hall for our musical students to perform in. And I kind of started thinking about something bigger than just a Beaird Museum of Swiss art, but an arts district. And then another domino fell out of the blue. We learned that the Crow family was interested in finding a permanent perpetual home for the Crow collection of Asian art, which is on display down on Flora Street, but in a space that does not encompass nearly all of the collection. And so after, again, lots of discussions, the university and the Crow family reached an agreement by which we would take over management of the Flora Street Museum and build a Crow museum on campus. And so now we had 2 art museums and a prospective music performance hall. And the clock was ticking when we had to take over the Crow art that was in the warehouse, and when we had to take over the Beaird collection, which is for the moment being stored in a warehouse. So our new president, Richard Benson, became very enthusiastic about elevating the overall UT Dallas education for our students to include the arts. In other words, we can proudly assert that we are first class in engineering and management and across the spectrum, but we thought that was not enough. We thought we should give our prospective engineers and medical doctors and CEOs a thorough grounding in overall culture, in arts and music. And so President Benson saw this as a great opportunity to round out the UT Dallas education for our students and to make connections with our community. And so after a period of time, we assembled at least a nugget of funding necessary to go forward, because we have to do everything in concert with the University of Texas System Board of Regents. But we got Regents' approval, and we have now engaged Morphosis Architect, again, the Perot residence there, Duncan. And we've started planning what the first stage, which will be the museum stage, because that's what we have the funding for, what that first element of the Athenaeum will be. The museum complex consisting of the Beaird Museum and the Crow Museum and the necessary DUC elements. It was interesting listening to Duncan's recounting of the Perot and then Brice's recounting. Duncan, it kind of reminded me of what goes on in physics when you're trying to build a particle accelerator. It does also take, and of course, I got to Dallas simultaneously with the death of the superconducting supercollider, if we can go back to 1992. One of the first things I went to was the wake bemoaning the death of the SSC. But those big accelerators take literally decades. I've sometimes teased my colleagues working on the planning that they don't know when they're well off, but it's much more happy just to keep planning than actually have to build the thing, because then things get tense. Accelerator might not work. We're not confident that our museum will not work, but it is important from my perspective to know why, beyond just that it's nice, why we think that art museums and it is something important for a university, and why an art museum on campus is different from an art museum in the general community. Now, we expect that our Barrett Museum and our Crow Museum will function with all of the activities that any community art museum has. But an art museum on a university campus is quite a different environment. It's got many additive supplements and enhancements. So why do we want it besides just that we like art? Well, we first of all, as I already mentioned, think it's important to provide our students, whatever their academic discipline, with a full-rounded education. We want our UT Dallas students to leave us with all the general knowledge and sophistication, savvy, as we use a Texas term, that they get at Princeton or Yale or Berkeley. So we want to make sure that our students have a complete, well-rounded education. But we also see that there are many benefits to the university. I say we've got an audience that renews itself every year. 6,000 new students a year, 8,000 living within walking distance of the museum. Visiting parents, prospective students. It'll give everybody who comes to campus something to focus on, something to enjoy, and take away the correct impression that UT Dallas is a full-fledged big league university. And of course, we have our Institute for Art or otherwise is an adjunct of the university, much like a library. It's a repository of past excellence. It's our history. And so our history classes and our art classes will have an in-house laboratory to supplement and enhance their education. So we think that the art museum on campus and arts district on campus will be something that's great for UT Dallas and great for our surrounding community, and add a lot. Now we are still in the talking stages. I brought a couple of images that we're thinking about, and we can see the first one, the aerial view of what the Athenaeum landscape will look like. This is currently a parking lot for the School of Management. This is taken really from the somewhere above the School of Management, looking south toward Campbell Road. Since we're taking up the management school's parking lot, we have to put in a compensation for that. The building on the left is a multi-story parking garage to take care of the space we're eating up with the museums. The building the closest to us on the right is the museum complex. The building next down is the music performance hall with rehearsal and practice facilities. And the third building down that row is a yet totally prospective museum for any further donations of great art that we are fortunate enough to obtain in the future. A second view, ground level view, in the second presentation will show the Barrett Museum component of the Athenaeum. So we say have engaged Morphosis, we've engaged Beck Group, and we're now trying to make everything we want fit into all we have in terms of financing, which is always an interesting proposition. But when you hear the word Athenaeum, hear art and music, high culture, and community engagement and student enhancement. We'll probably be explaining the Athenaeum forever as to what it really is. But what it is art, music, and better things of what we get educated to appreciate. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Hobson. So what we're going to do, I'm going to ask maybe one or two follow-up questions. We've got about 20 minutes, and we want to leave about 10 of that for the audience. So we're going to ask any of y'all that have questions to go ahead and get them to Nate. And Nate, I think we want to do that through the chat feature. Is that correct? That's going to, so if y'all have access to the chat feature and you do have any questions, please shoot them, and Nate will.
Yeah, through the Q&A function, Duncan. They can.
Q&A. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. So I've got Brice. This is a question for you. Hobson talked about the site that he has and why they're using that. You're still looking for one. So talk to us about your thoughts on site, what you look for, what you kind of where you would head in that direction. And Brice, go ahead, and I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. It does boil down to feasibility. Even with the group that we're talking to at Fair Park, I think one of the principal concerns was, and the first thing that came to the table was, we need to see a feasibility study. And we've definitely looked into different companies. You know, as we look at locations, it's a matter of cost. You know, a feasibility study is not cheap by any means. And you also have to be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to say, the study says no, and you have to be willing to accept that after you've gone through that entire process. As far as location, Duncan, you know, we had for several years kind of gone to the mat for Fair Park. We really saw that as being just a perfect place for this to be. The backyard at our backyard for the Texas Music Experience would allow great outside music venues throughout Fair Park and the State Fair Music Hall, everything all the way up to the Cotton Bowl. So it made sense that, you know, we could move forward and really promote Texas music in that location. Plus, you also had a little thing called the State Fair of Texas that came every year with 3.5 million people. So, you know, to tie into that and to work cross promotion with the State Fair, all those things pointed to something that did seem like it could be a reality. But we're still looking, and definitely as we pinpoint, there are some other location opportunities. But again, it would get back to looking at it and with an eye towards feasibility study.
Good. Thanks for that. And Hobson, a follow-up for you. Brice mentioned some of the other institutions that he considers models of peer institutions around the country. How about UTD and the Athenaeum? Any other museums that you would consider models or peer institutions?
Well, literally, essentially every distinguished university has got an art museum. The Broad Museum in Michigan State, UC Davis has just created a wonderful new museum. Our former director of the DMA body, Pittman, came from the Berkeley Art Museum. There's the Nasher Museum at Duke, Ray Nasher, gifted. Of course, we got the Meadows at SMU. So I go back to my time at Oxford, the Oxford Museums, Cambridge Museum. So it is a natural component of a university, just like a library is. It is a repository of what's happened in the past that we want to preserve and propagate into the future. So it's a joke in Michigan State, where I spent many great years, was that John Hannah, one of the great presidents of the 20th century, got into his head that every great university needed a cyclotron. And so Michigan State got a cyclotron. That's why I went there. And today they've got a $1 billion facility for for the whole world. So this is not a cyclotron, but we think it is also an essential feature of a great university. And that's what we are. And we want the world to know it and our students to appreciate it. So
Right.
it's not unusual. It's just unusual for UT Dallas. We had other existential issues to deal with before, but now we've dealt with those. We are critical mass, and it's time to move on into the next realm.
And then this is the last question I will ask before we turn it over to the audience questions. What are just real quickly, one or two lessons that each of y'all have learned during this formative process, or maybe not lessons learned, but perhaps things that you would want others to know?
As I think I mentioned before, the notion that timing is everything, and I'm still going through this process. It seems like every 6 months something changes in that timing cycle, and in the development of this. The other thing that I want others to know, as in my position where I am, we have this advisory group, but I'm still in the process of board of directors establishment, a development planner. Those things are critical to get us into a workable budget that will see us on. Maybe also in our instance, we don't start out as grand as 70,000 square feet. Maybe it's a smaller model that will help us get off the ground. So maybe starting small is a possibility and a thought there.
Good. Hobson, things that you'd like others to know about the form?
Yeah, well, of course, our situation is quite different. We don't have any time. We've got a timeline we've got to fulfill, because pretty soon we've got to take over the art and show it. And the real message is, it's the eternal message is that you always have grander visions in your pocketbook. And the stress of making those two match is always going to be there, because the great ideas just keep coming. But no, it's like our situation is kind of opposite from Brice's. All of a sudden we have the art and we got a timeline to show it, and we're gonna do that. The virus knocked us for a loop. We thought we'd build that garage first, but with the virus and no students on campus, we're not sure how many automobiles will be on campus in the future. So these things happen. In fact, we're a year behind because of the virus, like a lot of people. But no, it's everybody has got their dreams, and there's only one reality.
Yeah. As architects, we're familiar with helping navigate that process. So Nate, with that, I think we're going to turn it over to you to maybe some audience questions.
Very good. So the first question is for Brice, and the question is, so you have this interest in music, obviously, in the Experience Music Project museum, but how did you personally develop an interest in music, and did you study various instruments?
I started playing guitar when I was like 8 years old, and I had great inspiration from a choral director at a church here in Dallas, St. Michael's All Angels Episcopal Church, Paul Thomas, who wrote incredible music, church music, and I was so inspired by that. And he actually was the one who encouraged me to start writing music. So I've been playing guitar and writing songs since I was 10. I don't think I can remember any of them now, but guitar is my instrument, though, and it definitely has this has played into my interest and excitement for trying to get this project off the ground.
Great. Then several questions for Hobson. One says, I'm a student at UTD and study with Dr. Patel. I'm very excited about the Athenaeum. Is there a general timeline or year we can look forward to an opening? Thank you for carrying out this vision. The student body and larger community, and Dr. Patel is very important to him.
Yes, well, as I say, we are right now. We've got a construction firm, and we've had an architect for several months, and the people who understand how long it takes to build a building. We've built several on the UTD campus, so I would say it's 2 to 3 years.
Great.
And we've also got to take over the art in that same time span. So
Right.
2025.
Okay, fantastic. Then another question. This question says that Dr. Bertel had done kind of a 2-year programming initially for the Athenaeum. And the question says, it seems to me that it's a somewhat different vision of what's currently being planned. How do you see those two visions coming together?
Well, we have entertained visions of an even bigger and greater Athenaeum. And the funding is there for these 2 museums and the necessary complement to the museums. We ever get more funding, we've got the site and we've got space to the south. So the issue is vision versus reality. I thought it was a brilliant quote, but apparently nobody knows who said it. But vision without funding is hallucination. We've got some funding, thank goodness, and we're going to have some reality. But we could use more funding and do more great things with it. But that's where we are.
Great. Will the Athenaeum have a library and a garden?
It will have one of the key elements of the museum complex that we're building will be the Bertel Reading Room with its own library. And yes, we haven't got into the landscape design, but the building is designed to open out into gardens on 2 of the 4 sides. You always got to have a back door, but the north side and the east side will both open into gardens. And if you noted the design, there's also going to be these museums are going to be elevated, so there'll be shady areas for fountains and tables and chairs.
Great. Brice, a question for you. Is the Texas Music Museum working with the Texas Music Office?
Down in Austin, yeah. I've been down there 2 or 3 times, and actually, it always raises the question, why Dallas and not Austin? And I have lots of answers for that. I could probably talk to you for a couple more hours, but I have, yes, I've met with them, and it's the same kind of thing. They see a great interest in this, but they also, the last word was, we need to see financially how this thing is ramping up and how it's going to form. And once that starts to happen, come back to us and we'll talk some more. So that's basically where we are.
Okay. I guess this is a related question. The question is, they want Austin, ? So.
Yeah. It's interesting that there was legislation that was came up a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to actually the Bob Bullock Museum or building there across the street from that, they were going to have a Texas Music Museum. And I don't know all the odds and ends, but ultimately this legislation did not pass. And so Austin completely was, what all the efforts that they were making finally just shut down. And I don't know what's happened from that point on, but there is a great reason why this place can be in Dallas. There is so much rich Texas music history that's here, and maybe we do a satellite in Austin as well. There's no telling at this point.
Yeah. Next question, and Hobson, you kind of covered this. It says, who is the architect with Athenaeum? I mean, it's Morphosis, Tom Main, and his crew, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great.
And then one more question about the site for the Athenaeum. This person says that the original concept for Bertel was to have a site with great adjacency to the McDermott Library. Why was the site changed?
Yes, well, actually, when we first entered into discussions with Richard Barrett, I took the Barretts on a tour of campus, and it's got to go somewhere, and we don't like to tear buildings down, although we have when necessary. But I showed that site to Richard Barrett. It's got presence right off the big boulevard leading into the university. It's right off of the Circle Drive that Peter Walker's landscape project created. Faces onto Campbell Road, and it was empty. And Richard Barrett loved the site, and so that was the original site, and it's now the final site. In this case, it's on campus, so we don't have to worry about where it's going to be. It's going to be on campus, and this was the site that we agreed upon with Richard Barrett.
Great. Well, I think in the interest of time, I want to thank Brice and Hobson and turn it back to Duncan. Thank you, Duncan. I'll let you have the final words.
Well, I in turn want to thank the forum for hosting this. As many of y'all know, our forum panels tend to focus on local issues, and they're often a little bit more expansive than architecture. And so I'm so grateful that the forum saw fit to really delve into this whole issue of both formative process, to also do it in a way where it was grounded in some real things that we can watch develop, and hopefully in another 5 or 10 years, be able to perhaps have another one of these and talk about the new generation of museums that are coming. And the lead off on that will be some stories and anecdotes from what it took to really make the Texas music experience in the Athenaeum at UTD happen. So again, thank you all for being here. And Nate, I will turn it over to you to close us.
Thank you so much. We look forward to having hard hat tours of both of these museums in the not too distant future. So again, Brice, Hobson, Duncan, thanks to each one of you, and thanks to all of you for joining us. We have one more panel next Tuesday night. Hope you join us, and until then, good evening. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.